Enjoy a seat at the table for great conversation and good company.
Welcome to And Good Company. I'm Sarah Fiedelholz. We all know a great dinner party isn't really about the food. It's about the people seated around the table engaging in lively discussions. And Good Company gives you a seat at the table to enjoy smart and engaging conversations as they happen. I am very pleased to be in the company of the co-founders of AVOW, Advancing Voices of Women, Patty Hayes, Faith Van Gelder, and Marilyn Moran Townsend. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, and obviously we should make note that you do have a foursome, so you would be great for bridge. And Rachel Tobinson cannot be here today. So, but we got 3 out of the 4. I think we're doing pretty well.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. So, Advancing Voices of Women is celebrating its 5th anniversary. So you were founded in 2017. So let's start with talking about how did AVOW come about?
Well, I'll begin back in early 2016 as all of us were watching what was going on in Washington, D.C. with the federal elections. And I was particularly distressed about the lack of civility, the terrible rhetoric, the name-calling, the things that were going on at the federal level. And I said to myself, gosh, I hope that never comes to Fort Wayne. I hope that Indiana remains a place where we don't do that sort of thing. And I decided to send out an email to everybody on my email list, which several thousand people, and certainly not all just in Indiana, but all over the world, and said, I'd like to start a conversation about how do we make sure in our own communities that we continue to have civil conversation, that we aren't being harsh like this. And a lot of great people all over responded to that. And one of them was Rachel Tobin Smith, who I just wish she could be here today. But we were really having great conversations amongst ourselves about what could we do locally, because I think all of us felt like it really works better from the ground up and at the local level to talk about how you can make sure that you have good governance that is not harshly attacking. And so those conversations continued through and past the fall election. And that's probably the point I should stop, because Faith and Patty can tell you a lot about their actions during that time as well.
Well, Marilyn used the word distressing, and that's the first word that came to my mind too. 2016 for me and for millions of other people, women and men both, was distressing, disturbing, upsetting. And a lot of it was because of the language and the rhetoric and the terminology used, and just these anti-immigrant, anti-women, you name the group.
Anti-everything.
Anti-everything that was on full display. And so the elections happened in November, and then there was an opportunity to go to Washington, D.C. for the Women's March in January of 2017. And I was out west, and I was traveling when I got the email saying there were just a few spots left on the bus, and I was just not into it. I was not feeling like I was going to do it. And my husband said, "Oh, you should go. How do you call yourself a feminist? You should go." So I literally got one of the last seats on the bus, and Patty was sitting right in front of me. And it was, even though it was dark, we drove overnight to get there. It was dark all the way. It was dark all the way back the next night. We really bonded. There were about 40 women, I think, on the bus. And I knew a few of them. Had a box, a Botel box of wine and some plastic cups and maybe some Girl Scout cookies, and we passed them around the bus, so that helped. But that day, just seeing the hundreds of thousands of people, and it wasn't just women's rights and women's equality, there were people representing all sorts of issues. And I came back inspired, motivated, encouraged to try to turn around these negative emotions that I and so many other people were feeling. What can I do to make a difference? And that's, I think, the only thing that saved me for a while. And I think Patty has some really good reflections from that event too, because it was really, I don't want to say life-changing, but it was very powerful in the moment and very memorable.
I was writing my thoughts recently as at someone's request, and one of my big takeaways was I had no idea how big the crowd was until after, and I watched the news coverage, and to hear numbers anywhere between 750,000 to a million, I don't know what the final count was. I only saw the few people standing around me. There was an 80-year-old woman in front of me that I kind of kept hovering to be sure.
That's the nurse in
the
you.
nurse in me. But I was standing next to I had met up with my 22-year-old niece who lives in DC and works in the Congress. And to have this experience, but my reflection as we moved from, we couldn't see the stage, but we were near a TV screen. And as we moved in mass to within a block of the White House, it was an orderly group. There was chanting, there was no windows broken. Because when you bring women together, we protest, we speak out, we find our voice, but it's no vitriol, no violence. Where could we pull together that many people? And it planted that seed of, okay, now what? I missed the civil rights marches by my age. I missed, the best I ever did was an Earth Day march. What do we do? And coming back to Fort Wayne, Rachel called me up for coffee and said, I have this idea. The Journal Gazette is interested. Women don't write letters to the Journal Gazette.
They don't have time.
We have opinions, but we feel as if I have to be an expert. I can't speak up on schools because I'm not on the school board, I'm not a teacher. We find excuses to not share our opinions, and we have a lot to share. So she started by saying, Patty, would you write something on disabilities? And that was my connect with her. But the conversation was, we need to do something more. And thank you, Club Soda, shameless plug. We sat and brainstormed. Who else needed to be there? Faith was on the bus. Marilyn had started.
I don't even remember how I got invited to the table. I had known Patty for years through book club and Leadership Fort Wayne. But like Marilyn and Rachel were like, oh, that's what I want to be when I grow up. You know, like I knew them, I had heard of them, but I had.
And
like,
I think that's really important to know that this is nonpartisan and it's a nonprofit, but you all, the four of you who started this, are very different. Your ideologies are different. You're political. You show the spectrum, your ages, backgrounds, and even, and you're all, very accomplished professional women. So I think that's really important to know that even the founders had to come together and be able to have civil conversations.
Right. That's true.
And so I think, so Karen Francisco, who was, who just recently left as the editorial page editor, and she actually took one of the Sunday columns as her last column. And so she really said that what she was really trying to do, first of all, was that people aren't talking to each other, and or if they're listening, they're only listening to people who just support what they
Echo
think.
chamber.
Right.
Yep.
And that also she wanted to lift women's voices and encourage civility, and she felt that that women need to be heard, and that she really encouraged you to, it's not the things that you should look for in politicians or, are listen to the candidates who don't defend bluster, attacks, or polarizing rhetoric. Listen to those who seek common ground, and listen for the quiet and thoughtful voices. And that's really a lot of times for women. So you started with, and you've now been doing this, it's 5 years. Every Sunday, you have a woman, and they write about all kinds of things. It's not just about politics. It's not like what's happening in Washington. It could be, experiences with your own children or something. Anything, right?
Yeah, it really can be. And there are a couple things I would add to that is that as Patty was describing the fact that at the time there were so few women who were writing opinion columns or letters to the editor here locally, and we're so proud of the fact that the Journal-Gazette's been recognized nationally for having so many women's voices appearing in opinion now, that is remarkable and actually doesn't exist hardly anywhere else in the country. So it's a huge thing. But Patty also talking about people not feeling like they were experts. Also, there's just a tremendous amount of research that shows for women to step up for something, they have to be asked.
Right.
And so they don't just get up in the morning and look in the mirror like a number of men will do and say, I'm going to write something today. And they don't do that. They may really feel very passionately and have great amount of expertise about something, but they're waiting for someone to ask. And so AVOW asks, and that's just wonderful. And then you have a lot of people who have a real fear of public speaking, which I help cover, but also a fear of writing and writing well. And Faith is the editor-in-chief in that regard. She is fabulous in helping women who maybe have a writer's block for a moment or just need someone to take a look at their
And those
columns.
Sunday morning pieces, Sarah, have now resulted in routine letters. More women are writing letters, more guest opinion pieces, independent of Sunday morning,
Right.
are being submitted. And as with any shift in stereotypes, someone had to go first.
Right.
And now it's like,
Right.
well, I have an opinion, I can share that.
But I'm going to play
permission giving.
Right. I want to play a little bit of devil's advocate, a little bit about, because one is there's not a lot of opinion writing being done anymore. Because also an editorial page is really, I mean, the fact that nobody wants it to be anonymous. So I like, that you put the picture and you tell about the person. But knowing the state of newspapers and who's reading newspapers and the decline, and are you also reaching, really across the board? I mean, that's a really, unfortunately, a very small segment, and it's a very specific demographic.
Well, it's the paper, Sarah, and maybe a lot of people are no longer feeling really connected to the tactile newspaper.
Right.
But the social media strategy that goes with this, both at the Journal-Gazette and then what Faith heads for AVOW, and then many others will then multiply it through their own organizations and opportunities, has just made this really widespread. We feel very good about
And
that.
I'll correct, there's a lot of people sharing their opinions. It just often is in social media.
It's not in a formal form
Right.
of like sitting down and writing it.
Yeah.
So,
And I do see in my, whether it's my LinkedIn page, my Facebook, every time it's a chance to demonstrate that I disagreed with something that might have been said or done, but I model that element of civility and will call out people who fail to do that. Name calling doesn't advance our discussion.
Right.
How else might you approach this subject?
She's actually called me out before. So she's telling the truth.
right.
Well, it's really just how wonderful it is, how many times the opinion columns that AVOW's writers are creating end up being quoted in everywhere. Obviously, just face-to-face discourse, but everywhere. And so you'll see somebody take that and use it as a way to advance their point in their own social media. So yeah, it's wonderful.
I mean, I think two other things is, unfortunately, in some ways, and probably for women in particular, the word politics has become a dirty word. But also, unfortunately for women, the word feminist and feminism has really become, like a lot of women are, I'm not a feminist, and they really don't understand what it is. So when you find, when you were thinking about why we need AVOW on the local level, and with this idea of, did this come up? Like, okay, well, we want to bring together women, but they're not so fond of the word politics, and we don't want to come across that we're going to be these, whatever their stereotypes of feminists, whatever anyone thinks of a feminist is, or their own meaning of it, or the marches, or burning bras, or whatever. So did you think about this and how you approached, and when you thought about why we need it, and what were the things you were going to do?
So we very specifically did identify that this would be the place where we could advance the voices of women, and we were very aware of the fact that there are not a lot of women, or certainly 5 years ago, there were fewer women who were engaged in government, who were in the public square in an appointed position to a government board or those kinds of things, and women who felt comfortable enough to be able to speak out about the things they care about. And so we did recognize that this was an area where we could really help women, and we engaged a number of men to help with that as well. And so early on, when we formed the AVOW Women's Campaign Institute, I reached out to our former mayor, Paul Helmke, good friend. He and Graham Richard, I always said to both of them that nobody knew what party they were from. And that was one of the things I admired so much about them, as both of them would routinely say there is no Republican or Democrat way to fill a pothole. And they were just terrific in that regard. So I felt that they both modeled what we were looking for in terms of a nonpartisan way to get more people who would be engaged in government service and would reach across the aisle to get things done. And both of them were fabulous at that. So we got Paul involved very early on with our Paul Helmke School for Women in Public Life, and he was one of our first speakers. So, and a number of men come to our civil conversations. So Patty may want to tell you a little bit about that.
Let's start with, so you had, you had one of the focuses, the Campaign Institute.
Right.
Okay. So let's talk about that.
Okay.
And what its purpose is, and what it serves to do.
So the Women's Campaign Institute pulls together a small group of women who have decided they either wish to serve, to run for office, they wish to work on a campaign for elected office, or they wish to seek appointment to a government board or commission. That last piece was just added in 2021. And we are really careful about making sure that we have close to equal representation for women from both parties, or women who haven't decided yet which party they may wish to be connected with. And so we bring together somewhere between 15 and 20 women for a real boot camp. It was the last one was 27 hours from noon on Friday till 3 o'clock on Sunday. So I mean, it's intense. And for some of the best training they could find anywhere in the country. So we have Patty Rousseau, who is the executive director of the Women's Campaign Institute at Yale, now called the Campaign Institute. We have Sarah Jane Rose, who heads Sally's List in Oklahoma. Paul Helmke always comes up. A fabulous group of professors, both locally and nationally, who come to teach, serve as professors of the Institute. We invite the women to participate in this to learn everything from how to put together your financial plan to run a campaign, to understanding the grueling effects this has to serve on your family and your personal life and your professional life, and to really think those sorts of things through and really get that and understand it. No question is too simple. We really take it from just those who are beginning to think about someday serving, to women who have already declared for an office. And we also make a real focus to make this incredibly accessible to women across our region. And so 12 of the 21 women who participated in the Campaign Institute in 2021 were women of color. And we had 6 women of color who were professors for the Institute as well. And it's just this terrific thing. And the thing that I love the most about it is we get to the graduation. And there is never a graduation where, when the women are making their graduation speeches, that somebody doesn't say, or several somebodies don't say, I didn't know any Democrats before I came to this institute, but I really like that person. Or someone will say, if you'd have asked me if I would work on a Republican woman's campaign, I'd have said heck no, and maybe in a stronger language. And now I'm going to work. And the week after the 2021 Campaign Institute concluded, there was a letter to the editor from one of the women who participated, who is of the opposite party, endorsing one of the women that she met. And it's magical that when you can bring women together. Now, where we're headed in 2022 is that it's not enough to just get elected.
Right.
We need to make sure that these women know how to govern, and they know how to govern in a way that they can get things done with people of all parties.
Right.
And that's going to be a big focus for 2022.
And Patty, you actually ran for office here. And
Don't bring that up, huh, Sarah?
No, I think it's really
She
important.
ran one of the best
No, because
campaigns in recent history. It was
only
fabulous.
307 votes. So the first thing that why I brought it up is why people need to understand why their vote matters. Because 307 votes is, I mean, I would have asked for the recount, but so but I was curious in terms of, I mean, you didn't necessarily, I mean, you had a vow, you know, in your support of women, but I'm curious as to what that experience for you, and then how that translates into you talking to women who may want to run, and sort
She's
of,
the best professor of the Institute. She's been through
and
it.
then
She's fabulous.
what you've learned, and then also
Sure.
seeing where we are, and you know, of course, I gotta put it out there again, because you know, would you run again for something?
Sure. We're still looking at the state of Indiana as 20% of elected offices are held by women. As hard as we work, as much as we do, we still have a long way to go. We've never had a female governor. We've never had a female senator.
And we've never had a female mayor.
Never had a
Well,
female.
we did.
Interim for like a
Cosette
couple of
Simon.
days.
So we've
Yeah.
never
But
had
never
right,
elected.
right,
Yeah.
right.
And never a duly
And
elected.
do you think, though, I'm going to just ask this, throw this out, I believe that Fort Wayne is ready for a woman mayor.
Definitely.
Yeah.
You know, I think
For
that
sure.
I believe the time is right. Like, this is the possibility.
So are you announcing here today?
No, I could never. I don't have the charisma and the control. I like being the journalist, you know, gets to ask the questions.
No, that's great.
But
it is-
maybe Patty.
what was important is I felt like everyone says, yeah, somebody should do that. Somebody should do that. And a realization that maybe one of the other good things I could do with AVOW was to go ahead and step out, use what I learned. I was a student at the very first Campaign Institute, and demonstrate that you don't have to be a lawyer, you don't have to be a political science major, you don't have to necessarily move things up, step out, take a risk. I lost. Life goes on. People still talk with me. And I learned a lot, because women will run and then don't run again if they don't win. And I've missed that opportunity to model, besides being a professor, if I don't run again.
Right.
So when people, right after November 2019, when people said, are you going to run again? I said, you know, right after I gave birth to my first child, if you asked me
Right.
if I was going to have another, I would go, hell no.
But the mind, you know, the mind does miraculous things to forget all that. And, you
Forget
know,
that. And
Right.
my more candid response was, well, I haven't thrown away my signs.
Right.
And if you look in the garage, the signs are still there. It was a lot of money. And I need to keep going.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It is hard to be a woman and put a campaign and then run in a public venue when it was hard for me as I was younger. 3 children, a husband who had a demanding job, still does,
Right.
and it's not uncommon to find someone, empty nest. We love to say, don't think because you're 55 it's the wrong time to start a political career. Absolutely not. Now's the time. You've still got a lot of energy.
Right.
I was on
Come on
Patty's
in.
team,
Right.
and she did a great job. She walked the neighborhoods, wearing her campaign T-shirt, handing out cards. She raised a respectable amount of money. She was very successful at that, and she had great, like, social media ads, digital ads. My previous job, I was at a marketing agency, and so we partnered with her to do that. And a lot of people then, when she got to their door, they said, "Oh, we saw your ad on Facebook." So we learned a lot,
Right. And
and
you
it would be terrible if all of that
Yeah.
learning just went by the wayside.
And Faith, you've learned a lot because you've worked behind the scenes as like a campaign manager. I know you worked with Melissa Reinhart on her campaign for
Perry Township trustee several years
and
ago.
again, and she's a graduate of the,
Right.
and she lost, but now she's back and she's running for state representative
in
and
the 82nd House District, which
Right.
is the newly
Right.
redrawn district. I'm her campaign treasurer. It's a small but powerful team.
so again, it's but again, it's like you don't only have to be the face out in front. You could be behind the scenes, and then you could do things. But I'm wondering, you know, one of the things I was thinking about is I don't believe that party affiliation belongs on the local level. Like, I find it very difficult because the truth is, like you said, Helmke said, potholes don't get fixed. And a lot of the issues that people usually use to vote, you know, their one issue votes, are not really decided on a local level. And and after 2016 election, what happened was a lot of people, and this is where, or even before, because when you had Pete Buttigieg, because you saw that mayors were very positive and cities became very powerful because people felt that things were getting done and it wasn't about party. And so how do you think this creep of this, because now even they want to do it with school board people, that they want you to have to run by party. Where does this come from? And do you think it's more intentionally that, okay, I'm going to say it's the powers that be that we know are predominantly men who want to, you know, sort of divide people, continue to have this division and not bring people together? Or do you think it's that people just have lost all civility, so it's just easier to just say you vote? And people don't even realize, like someone was telling me that, actually it was Councilwoman Michelle Chambers told me that people go in to vote, they think, they didn't even know that you can pick, they think they have to vote their whole ticket. So she, you know, so we don't even, people don't even know how to vote. And so I'm wondering where all this plays into it.
You know, I'm not going to blame men for this
Okay.
at all. Our country is divided on the big issues, and now it's trickling down
But
to
do you
the state and local level. Even like what kinds of food we buy and what colors of caps we wear and masks we wear, and what our policies are, philosophies are for education, for example. I mean, at the most grassroots political level, school board, an entry level point for many women to get involved in politics, and currently nonpartisan races. We're seeing it, and it's tragic in my mind.
Don't you think it's
really
hurting?
is.
Don't you believe that this is really hurting local government? I mean, that it's becoming so.
Yes.
Yeah, it's interesting because the parties use the local elected offices as a farm system. Townships, precinct committeemen, a lot of these are really where you get your people who are working on the campaigns at the higher level. They have aspirations to move up. So it really has been that kind of system, and I understand the system. What I think is really fascinating right now is I don't know that this system will prevail in the near future, because people are starting to rethink what is the purpose of the party. Certainly the eruption among the Republican Party members at the national level in this last week or two have really caused people to say, what is the purpose of the party, and why do we have this party? And you've got some very prominent Republicans in Congress who have been speaking out against the decisions that the Republican National Committee made. So it would not surprise me at all to see that the move for a new party gets stronger. It may take a while, but it wouldn't surprise me at all. But I think at the local level, at the state level, at the national level, everybody is thinking about what is our purpose and how can we advance good government. And I really do believe that is the case. I don't think anybody goes into doing this to say, oh, I want to really mess things up. They all have aspirations of advancing good government, and you can have a lot of good people working on things and be at cross purposes, largely because they don't understand each other. So I think that's a big piece of why we want women to be able to understand women of the other party and be able to reach across the aisle to get good things done.
There's a lot of legal issues in campaigns as well. And the party fills a valuable role to make sure one doesn't misstep, one hits the deadlines, one doesn't mismanage funds. It is more complex. City council can't fathom looking at a state senate. You know, where you're talking several $1 million for a campaign. So the party helps with that.
Okay.
And that is often why there's an alignment, because that's where the resources are. There also is access to dollars. Potentially AVOW, through our Campaign Institute, can help provide some of that information. Some of the guidelines. You don't have to be affiliated with a party to print out the Indiana State Guidebook and go through and read it. Forms don't require that you, then now there are different steps if you don't have a party affiliation, but we're bright, we can read that, we can figure that out.
But we do have the party heads
Yes.
who come to the Institute as professors, and we do a session on what the parties can do for you, and as well as PACs. And that's really important for the candidate to be able to understand all of that.
So now I'm going to go pivot to talking about women. Okay, because so I think women, we are 51% of the population in the United States. We are 51% of the population in Fort Wayne, okay? And we have yet to have a female mayor, and we only have 2 women councilwomen. Now, partly, I think, so not only are we being divided by party politically, but women have a tendency to not really come together. Like, even with the Equal Rights Amendment. I mean, you had stay-at-home moms versus working moms that, you know, they pitted themselves against each other. So I think, and then, you know, I think even understanding, you know, because I've talked a lot with, you know, Michelle Chambers and Sharon Tucker and Sheila Curry Campbell and Regina Jones, and then about the issues of being women of color or minorities running for office and raising. And so now you've got, I mean, with women, they're so, you know, they're little fiefdoms and divisiveness. And I was like, to them, I was just saying, okay, but why can't we just come together as women? And then we put forth the best candidate. Because at the end of the day, if you really think about what are the issues that women have, you know, they're all the same. And so why is there this problem? Like, why can't, like, you know, you would think, you know, I would think with AVOW that, you know, okay, we're just going to get all these women to 51% and we're going to vote and we're going to, you know, I mean, like what I call, you know, what I want to call it is like a takeover. You know, we're 51%. So there should be like, just, come on, women, like, do a march, you know, get out there. What is it that why we can't come together as women?
You know, we're fitting into a world that has been designed by people that are not necessarily
it's a
female.
patriarchal society.
You know, I couldn't get a credit card
For years.
when I graduated from college without a male signature.
Right, you couldn't get a mortgage.
No mortgages, absolutely. And we've only had the vote for 100 years. Sarah, give us time. We'll get there. This is
but we've got the numbers. So I really want to, let's, you know, not on a local level, because this is really where you are. Why? What is it that you hear or women say, or when you have your civil conversations? Well, I mean, granted, civility's gone out the window, but why can't...
Not at an AVOW.
Well, okay, but why can't we, yes, right. Why can't we just come together as women and not be like, if you're a stay-at-home mom versus a working mom, if you're, you know, a single mother versus a, you know, married, the LGBTQ community women. I mean, we're all women.
I have a theory.
Okay.
And it starts with a lack of civics education in school. That's one of the topics that has been cut. And so there's a surprising amount of unawareness of even how where you live runs. Who is your congressperson? Who is your governor? Who are your U.S. senators? People don't even know that level.
But let's take it down to the local level.
So
people don't know
they
the county,
certainly
township.
don't know
Okay.
their township
All right.
trustee.
So is that, all right, so we'll put lack of education, okay, but that's across the board.
And that's smart people.
Right, no, yeah.
It's just a lack of, we take our right to vote very casually in this country, as you know. The statistics all bear that out. And so if you don't vote, if you don't read the paper, or you just see what
Right.
news stories your network is posting online, you are not going to be aware of who's representing you, what their views are,
Right.
and do they jive with what you feel. So part of what AVOW does is try to break down those barriers and invite elected officials to be on our panels for civil conversations, for example,
Okay.
and to write and to be faculty at our
Professors.
Right, but I'm
campaign
talking about
institute.
how do you get the women, all the women to come together? Because that, you talk about what you felt when you were in Washington. How do you get all the women in Fort Wayne to sort of come together? And then, because I was thinking about this because Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the late Supreme Court Justice, said that sometimes she's asked, when will there be enough women on the Supreme Court? And she would say, when there are nine people.
Right.
And when there are 9. And she says people are shocked, but there have been 9 men and nobody
I
even
love
raised a
that
question
quote.
about it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, like I said, I think that this is, I'm really looking at a local level. This is the time I think that the community's ready for women, but we're 51%. So what is it that you think are the roadblocks to get women together? I mean, I have my own, that I think women are not as, I think we're by nature of, we've been competitive for attention and men's attention, and so women are put against each other, and there's that all how everybody's comparing and one-upmanship and because appearances and all of that, and I think that's just inherent. But I just feel like we've got the numbers.
But you don't vote for a candidate just because they're a female.
Right.
Right. Well, that's
And we need to make sure that don't vote for me because I'm a woman.
Right.
Vote
No,
for
I
me
said-
because I'm the best.
Well, that's what I said. Like,
Candidate.
the women come together and we put forth the best candidates, regardless. But if we come together as women, we could get them in office, right? I mean,
Well, we've had conversations about it as it relates to what happens next following the Campaign Institute, and it is not within the charter of AVOW or our nonprofit status, et cetera, for us to endorse candidates.
Right.
And because we are a nonpartisan organization, we are supporting women of both parties who may ultimately, and we've certainly had that happen, run against each other.
Right.
So it's important to remember that. But we are talking about what's next, and there may be the formation of another organization, a PAC, that will help get more women elected.
And so, I sort of touched on this when you and I had a conversation about it being the 5th anniversary. And, okay, you've got a lot of time under your belt now that you can look back and reflect and see what you did right, what you did, and what's next. So when you look at the next 5 years for AVOW, what is next?
Well, that may be one.
That may be one. Okay.
Yeah,
So
that certainly might.
one of my questions is what are you doing for the next generation of, we talked about this for
Right.
teens and giving them the voices.
One of
and-
our next civil conversations is going to happen on a college campus. We've had several of the local colleges ask, is this something that can be replicated there? And so, nice segue, you didn't even know that's
Right.
what we were working on.
Right,
Yeah.
and I think also addressing what you talk about that partly what AVOW does is you're trying to get rid of the biases. I think you need to do a civil conversation on the implicit biases that women have about other women.
Sure.
Because I think that we need to call it out, And the other thing that I was thinking is
Interesting.
that you're all about women's voices, okay? And I feel like, okay, this 5 years, it's all about the voice, got it, and getting that seat on the table. But now I feel the next 5 years should be women owning their power. Because it's not just about having the voice. And like you said, like women feel they need to be asked. So I feel like, okay, you've helped everybody get their voice and we have things to say and we're doing the public speaking, but we don't understand how to use our power. And that means even as a group or your power individually, or like the woman who taught, when you're going into a meeting or anything and you do your Superman power pose. to give yourself-
Superwoman.
Take as
Superwoman.
much
Space,
space.
Because we're used to taking up as little space.
space,
But
right.
even the issues of like, when you are negotiating your salary increase, do you know if a woman is negotiating with another woman versus a man, Who do you think is going to give her a bigger raise?
The man.
Yes.
Man, yeah.
Have you read Machiavelli for Women right now?
Just checked it out.
Yes.
Yes. What are they?
They will talk about
But
it.
I will
Yes.
say, with my experience, my female boss did give me a bigger raise.
Okay. But also what reason you have to do this is because women have to check their implicit biases when they're evaluating, like on an evaluation. With men, it's just like, okay, this is what I did, this is what I contributed to the bottom line, this is how I helped this company, boom. Women, it's like, well, you weren't that well liked, you didn't go out with the team, you sort of didn't like buy, Girl Scout. I mean, they really look at these more kinds of things that have nothing to do with the workplace. And so what I feel is that women know we got the voices, okay, but in order to take those, we have to own the power. And so I'm wondering, as you think about, AVOW, and that you've done, I think you've done great to sort of get women to be heard and recognized. But what is next? I mean, what do you think about this idea of getting women to feel comfortable? And like you were saying, that they have to also feel comfortable how they're going to govern. Right. And I think a lot of that has to be with power, because women also want to be liked. They don't like it if somebody doesn't say nice things about them. I mean, certainly, probably when you were running and your opponent might say, you're sort of like, oh, that's not very nice, But you understand, you've developed a tough skin. I mean, but where does that fall in?
I think that's a personal journey that everybody takes on their own timeline and in their own way. We were all working moms, and that in itself presents a lot of priorities and conflicts and time constraints and I can't even imagine in the last couple of years what it's like to be a mom of little kids.
Right.
I mean, I think a lot of people are just focused on survival right now and just staying sane and staying employed and keeping everybody healthy in their family. And so I think we will reach that point of empowerment, but I think, like Patty said, it's only been 100 years since we've been voting, and we're on the trajectory and we're making progress. But what we're doing is trying to educate, inform, remind women, hey, you deserve a seat at the table. You don't need to be asked. You don't need to have a law degree.
Well, you need to take it.
Right.
That's power.
Right.
Power. See, and I think just like feminism, politics for women, I think there is a lot of negative associations, and what the connotations are, especially for men, if you are a strong, powerful woman, and I think that's that fear. But I don't think, I understand that it's been 100 years, but I sort of feel like we don't have another 100 years, because even look at the issues. Let's take it up a step, because we're in Indiana, the state level, the issues that are so pertinent to women's lives, right? So you talk about the income gap for women. You said it was one of the worst in the country, right? The idea of the infant mortality. Indiana's is one of the highest in the nation. Now we've got this issue of redistricting, which nobody even understands how this works. I mean, and then you've got women's health rights. You've got violence against women. So, I mean, and these are all things that are partly what AVOW is trying to do. So how do you, I've talked to you about this. How do you look at this when you just feel like you're at that, looking over the cliff, and it's just so much, and that this is the time. I mean, these are decisions, and there are laws being passed right now in the state legislature that are absolutely,
Awful.
right. Okay.
So
where does AVOW fit in there? I mean, I know that you're more
we have
about
regulations about bears now, so that's good.
Okay.
Bears.
That's what we worried about.
Yeah.
Right.
We're
Okay.
not worried about bears.
Front page.
Right. So how do you feel that 5 years in, and do you feel like you're making inroads, or do you feel like it really is going to take us another 100 years? And
No, I don't think it'll take 100 years, but it is demanding it, pounding the table. Isn't, some people, that is an effective tool.
Right.
For others, it isn't. And we aren't mandating this is a mechanism that works for you or not for me. Sometimes I find the greatest opportunity for me to be heard is to lower my voice. And
lean in.
and lean in. Now, we each have different techniques, but it will change. In my nursing career, when I started, the female physicians changed in the nurses' locker room because the physician lounge was male.
Right.
You go into any of the hospitals in town now, the physician female lounge is as big as the physician male lounge.
Right.
And that's in my short career. We will see those changes. I don't doubt that. And it is by having a gravitas. And that's what I saw at the Women's March, was not a revolt, it was what you're saying, a power of congregating and having a visibility that could not be denied, but it wasn't
But I think there's
with
a
revolt.
sense of urgency. And then
Definitely.
I do think, though, Marilyn, you and I talked about these Marilynisms, and there's the one that you said about not leaving the scorched earth. Can you repeat? Because I was trying to reiterate that to someone, and I was like, and I said to you, you have to write, and I hope you've started these Marilynisms that you and I would come up
I
with.
have not since we
So,
last met.
but what is that
I
one that
will
you
that-
talked about? Because we were
that-
talking about leaving the trail, right?
Yeah, trailblazers
Right.
do not have to leave a scorched earth. And in fact, they're better if they don't. It is so important that we are preparing women to be trailblazers and to get things done. And I completely agree with Patty that the best way to get things done is from the inside. So we're getting women elected, we're getting women appointed, we're making women's voices more apparent that drives public opinion. And those things help get things done, but they don't scorch earth.
Right.
And I think that's so important. We've been able to accomplish a lot as a result of that. And that's really, it's very tempting each year as we meet to work on what are we going to be doing next and advancing our future plans, to think about things that are far more global than what we're working on at the moment. We're all very ambitious in the way that we want to get things done, and it can become such that you become scattered as opposed to successful. And that's really critical, that we don't get mission creep, that we become ineffective at anything. Besides the fact, I want to mention two other important groups related to AVOW. They're not actually defined groups, or I'm not going to give you names, but it is the many other very powerful women's groups in the region.
Right.
And some of them work on how do they empower more women to succeed in the workplace and climb up the ladder. How do they get more women to vote? And many other groups.
Right, those
and
are like the Hoosier Women Forward, Women for Change, and even Greater Fort Wayne's leadership in Fort Wayne. And you are working.
League of Women Voters, and I mean, you know,
Right.
if I start naming, then I'll forget
Right.
somebody, and I'll be really sorry.
But you
about
are
that.
reaching
But the
out.
point is, yeah, there are a lot of other women's groups that have missions that are very much aligned with the work that we're doing, and we don't want to try in any way to usurp the great work they're doing. But we definitely want to collaborate so that we're not creating these little silos, like I was describing earlier, of good people, in this case good women, who are doing great work and maybe sometimes working at cross purposes because they just don't know about each other. And so that's really important. That's number one. Number two are men. And we have some wonderful men who attend our civil conversations, who get involved in the Campaign Institute. A number of them serve on campaigns for women and doing really good work. And so they're terrific allies.
Well, a lot of men.
And it's an echo chamber again if we only talk to other women
Right.
and we don't involve the other
Absolutely.
49%.
Right, because, well, there's also that saying, you know, happy life, happy wife. So a lot of men are smart, you know, if there are women in their lives and they want to support them and they see that they're very dynamic, and, you know, I mean, that's a shift that's going on societal about what are the roles in the men and women. But so are you hopeful of AVOW's future in the next 5 years? And
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We just elected several new board members, so we've got a great engaged board, a number of committees, and new officers.
Patty is the chair, and
Yep.
Faith is the treasurer, and Nicole Kiesling is the vice chair, and it's just a really great group of leaders. Yeah, it's wonderful.
Great. Well, as you know, at the end of each And Good Company program, I ask guests the same 12 questions. But Marilyn and Patty have both sat at this table before. And so you've already answered my first dozen. So I've developed a special list of questions.
Oh, my.
And these are really questions for things that I want to know about the people seated at the table. And so we'll just start and then so Patty, then you'll each answer the questions. What 3 words best describes you?
Empathetic, energetic, unpredictable.
Focused, consistent, dependable.
This was really easy. Feeding civic habit.
Right. Okay. So,
Go
Marilyn, what is something you are obsessed with and why?
Gosh, that is a hard one. Obsessed with. It's hard because I don't think I'm obsessed about anything.
Okay. We're not talking about like you're going to be a stalker type
She's
of
passionate.
but passionate, yeah.
Yeah.
Fuels you,
I am
drives you.
certainly passionate about civic engagement, so I'll
Okay.
be very consistent with that.
Empowering female leaders, starting at a young age, which is why I work at Girl Scouts.
Mine only applies briefly. I have a new granddaughter.
So you're really forging the next
There we go.
generation.
And
go.
a second granddaughter due.
All right.
Aw.
What is your favorite number and why?
12, and I'd rather not say.
Okay.
28 because it's my younger daughter's favorite number,
Okay.
and it's her birthday.
And infinity, that's easy too.
Okay. What is something you bring with you everywhere you go?
Why don't you start with Faith? How
Okay,
about?
Faith. What is something
Faith
you
gets the
bring with
first
you
one.
everywhere you go?
My iPhone, how boring is
No,
that?
no, beyond your.
Not a physical thing?
No, could be
Oh.
something, but beyond the phone.
Throat lozenges?
Okay. Patty.
An open mind.
Oh, jeez.
Well,
Marilyn?
Patty and I were on the same wavelength on that.
Glad I went first.
Expectation that things will go well.
Okay. All right, I'll give you another one, Faith.
Physical
Okay.
items in my purse.
What
Trick
are
question.
2 questions that you would ask to get the most information about who a person truly is? What 2 questions would you ask?
Where were you born? And what work do you do?
Marilyn?
Well, it's always the first question I ask is why.
Okay.
I really believe in open-ended questions. And then it's probably followed with a corollary of why not.
Okay.
Tell me about yourself.
That's 1. Any more?
Tell me about your family.
Okay. And Patty, we'll start with you. By what standards do you judge yourself?
Would I be okay if this was on the front page of the paper tomorrow?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Faith?
Patience and productivity.
Impossibly high.
Okay. All right, and Marilyn, now we'll give you an easier one.
Okay.
What is the number 1 thing on your bucket list?
Oh,
Ain't that expression?
I know.
We're not
me
gonna kick the
too.
bucket.
No, but on your
All right.
ultimate.
On your to-do,
Yeah,
life
but
to-do.
women, we don't want you to
All
have
right,
a
all
to-do
right.
list. So,
But it is to do good. It is really to feel like I'm contributing and that life is worthwhile.
Faith?
Someday, and I just told somebody this the other day, I would like to see you 2 in concert. You asked.
Yeah, there's no right
There's
or
no
wrong.
right or wrong.
Patty?
Yeah, I just went a different way. But I'll go with my first instinct, which when my children are asked to tell someone about themselves, that they mention me.
Oh, they will.
Okay. And Faith, is intelligence or wisdom more useful?
Oh, wisdom, of course.
Patty?
I always say I'd rather be lucky than smart. luck.
I always say, if luck is around the corner, turn often. Marilyn?
Wisdom, clearly.
Okay.
Actually, part of my daily prayer routine when I pray for all of our leaders is that they will be granted wisdom. And it's wisdom and a good heart and skills of good governance.
Okay. How likely do you think it will be that humans will last another 1,000 years, or the rate we're going now, I'm going to say 100 years, without killing ourselves off?
Well, I'm incredibly optimistic, so of course they will.
I'm a bit of a skeptic after many years in journalism and after the last few years of a global pandemic because of a virus that makes people ill on a scale of 0 to 1,000. I'm going to say no, I don't think humanity will be around in 1,000 years, or at least not what it looks like now.
Patty?
Only if we change.
Okay. And Faith, how long do you think you will be remembered after you die?
Oh, well, my mother died when she was very young, and she had 2 daughters, and we do talk about her and remember her and have her photos displayed in our homes. And I have 2 daughters, and I want to think that they'll talk about me someday with their grandchildren, even after I'm long gone. So a generation or 2.
Patty?
Realistically, 2 generations.
I said we got one, because then you get all those photos and you're like, who's that person? Marilyn?
Well, it's why I very carefully identify
Of course she
who's
does.
in every photo.
Of course.
But
Yeah.
I'm the photographer, so I'm not in many
Right,
of them.
right.
But I guess that would actually relate to my answer, which is I don't care.
Yeah.
I hope what I pass on are qualities that continue to live, and they don't have to be attributed.
Patty, what harsh truths do you prefer to ignore?
Jeez. My first 2 thoughts were very cynical, so
You got to go with your first thoughts.
what harsh truth.
I thought for sure I knew what you were going to say.
Well, my first thought was there's a lot of evil in the world.
Okay.
Oh, that's not it.
What did you think Patty was going to say?
2, so I'll say 1. That I've benefited from white privilege over the years and didn't even realize it until recently.
Okay.
And the second
I
one
wish
that
I had said that.
we think alike. And the second thing is I contribute to the pollution in the world by being a consumer and living in the richest country of the world.
Boy, those
Okay,
are
you've made up for
great.
your
Those are 2 good ones.
Really good ones.
Marilyn?
Yeah, Evo was first thing for me too.
Okay.
And I'd like to adopt Faith's answers, 'cause now that she said them, I go.
Well, I think
right
with
ahead.
our civility, we are allowed to do that, right?
That's
Yeah.
right,
Okay.
absolutely.
Marilyn, you'll start with the final one.
Okay.
What is the biggest threat to the social contract in our country?
Glad she went first.
Malintent.
Patty?
Not ensuring that everyone has a voice and a vote.
Faith?
Dishonesty.
Well, I want to thank the co-founders of AVOW, Faith Van Gelder, Patty Hayes, Marilyn Moran-Townsend, for having a seat at our table. And although I did invite you for this one, you can come back anytime. You do not need to be invited. You can come back. For sharing AVOW's successes as it celebrates its 5th anniversary and helping us to look forward to the future for women. And so I want to thank you.
You're
Thanks
welcome.
for giving
you.
us and helping to amplify our voice.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
And you can learn more about And Good Company and all the other great conversations we have had at andgoodcompany.info. And we look forward to next week when you can again enjoy a seat at the table for great conversation and good company.